Well, after the cabinet reshuffle, which once again, I want to remind people of this, everyone will agree we are in a housing crisis. I would say we are more in a housing absolute disaster. Not only has there been 9 different housing ministers in 10 years, none of them staying longer, by the way, than 12 months in the job, so no wonder the Tories can't come up with any solutions to the housing plan, because by the time one gets in, they can't seem to do anything with it. Or they just, as I highly suspect, they just don't care. It's just a job in the cabinet where they just seem to do absolutely nothing. Not only that, in Liverpool, you had a really, really good licensing scheme for landlords. One which tackled the problem of bad landlords doing, insane stuff like refusing to fix their properties into a livable condition. This worked massively in Liverpool. It was a successful programme. Guess what the Tories have done? They've refused to continue that licensing scheme. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that the Tories aren't out to help you or anyone else. And quite frankly, if you voted Tory in the last election and you are working class, you are being taken for an absolute ride. The best thing you can do at the next election will be to vote the Tories out. Not only that, but you should see it as your national duty to campaign for a alternative vote election. We should get rid of first past the post and just go to a PR, proportional representation type of election where it is based on the number of votes, meaning the percent, which turns into a percentage in Parliament, thus translating into the number of seats that a party wins. This will keep the Tories out of power pretty much forever, but this is something that we should absolutely campaign for and not give up. This is how we actually really change politics in this country. So, on to today's talking point, which is once again talking about the Tories. So, this comes from the New Statesman by Adrian Pavast, and it's Power Without Purpose. How the Tories don't have a national plan. Tories without a plan, especially Boris without a plan? You don't say. So, Anthony Trollope once remarked about the 19th century Conservative Party. No revolution stinks so foully in the nostrils of an English Tory as to be absolutely irreconcilable with them. When taken in the refreshing waters of office, any such pill can be swallowed. Trope's point seems prescient. Today's Tories are revolutionaries, true modernising radicals possessed by faith in technology and intent on governing with permanent insurgency. Led by a vanguard in number 10, they have declared war on Whitehall, seeking to revolutionise the state machine and turn Britain into a fortress of science parks and tech startups that will boost the fortunes of investors and innovators, while the masses are bought off with a few more Boris buses and police on the beat. And the Keynesian state capitalism is the means by which the Tories hope to accelerate their vision of modernity. Yet the Conservatives' cunning conversation to Keynesian economic activism represents not so much a realignment of British policies as a repositioning of the party. With the promises to unchain the capital and loosen the public purse strings, the government will prop up the economic model that is failing millions. Toughening immigration controls and their stance on law and order will satisfy the demands of greater security, but it will do nothing to reverse the social fragmentation or address the community breakdown. This is exactly what Britannia Unchained was advocating for. So this isn't a secret plan. The Tories have been very open about this and what they want to do. So going left on the economy and right on identity is hardly the same as initiating a new political settlement. That would require a coherent governing philosophy. But unlike Thatcherism, which drew on 30 years of Hayekian thinking, the government lacks the intellectual resources to bring about the different consensuses. Boris Johnson is by instinct an economic and social liberal. His senior aide, Dominic Cummings, the data crunching futurism pursues greater efficiency gains for the greater number, is also a utilitarian. They have an inkling of what needs to be done, but lack the concepts and political tools to make it happen. Their strategy for disruptive centralism was ruthlessly effective in the 2016 Brexit referendum campaign and the December general election, and they now have a large parliamentary majority and big plans. But their revolutionary reforms will unleash the forces of technology and accelerated capitalism, and so deepen the divisions just at the time when the country needs politics for the common good. The general election, we are told, marked a fundamental realignment in British politics. The Conservatives won decisively, uniting the Leave coalition of Tory shires and the ex-industrial working classes with promises of greater spending and getting Brexit done. Labour, with its support of middle-class professionals and students, lost everywhere to everyone. The Tory majority owes much to its new northern voters, whereas Labour's dwindling stronghold bases in London and other big cities could condemn the party to permanent minority status. In this extraordinary era, the fault line is no longer between the left and right, but between the liberal and post-liberal. The Tories are apparently post-neoliberal on the economy and post-social liberal on immigration and crime. Labour, meanwhile, still seems webbed to its liberalism of the EU's capitalist club, based on the single markets for freedoms in movement of goods, services, money and people. The Conservatives claim to occupy the new post-liberal centre ground that has a more support than the old liberal consensus, exemplified by the governments of Tony Blair and David Cameron. But even this new polarity seems inadequate to understand what is really going on. The liberal and post-liberal camps both have internal divisions. In any case, sometimes they act in complex cohesion, while in another they access the cross this divide. Johnson's victory brings this tension and confusion to the fore. The Tory liberals can be divided between economic liberals, such as the Ayn Rand reading Chancellor Sajid Javid and the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, and those who champion a mix of higher public spending with monetary moderation, such as a de facto Deputy Prime Minister Michael Gove and the Chief Secretary of the Treasury Rashi Sasak. In truth, both factors are united by the belief in deregulation and tax cuts. Boris Johnson is, of course, a politician of contradictions. By promising to reduce regulation inequality and diverge from EU rules, cut inheritance and income tax for higher earners, and slash stamp duty, he emboldens the two faces of contemporary conservatism. The post-liberal Tories are split between those who are nationalist, authoritarian, and anti-liberal on social issues, such as the Home Office Secretary Priti Patel, and those who promote the civic ties like patriotism, like the new MP Danny Kruger, whose recent maiden speech in the House of Commons was widely shared on social media. But both the anti-liberals and the post-liberals support the government's programme of toughening immigration controls by promising to introduce an Australian-style points system. This, they believe, will lead to an increase in high-skilled economic migration. The post-liberal Tories also agree on bolstering law and order through longer prison sentences, but prisoner rehabilitation and the more equal access to justice based on better funded legal aid are missing from a legislative agenda. Nor is there any much thinking about renewing the meaning of citizenship, duties and civic institutions. Worse, contemporary conservatism stretches the definition of paradox, something that looks wrong but turns out to be right. The Tories, such as the leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg, champion an aggressive market liberalism, while showing little understanding that it undermines the social conservatism they also purport to defend. At the rate of conservative philosophy, Roger Scruton often reminded of the Thatcher and post-Thatcher Tory party that the unfettered market turns everyone and everything into a commodity. Others, such as the veteran Eurosceptic Ian Duncan Smith, profess to uphold a Christian social justice tradition while replacing compassion for people in the need with central state power enacting a draconian social control. Duncan Smith was the architect of the universal credit, a bureaucratic system under which people who cared for relatives can miss out on support or lose their benefits altogether. It treats human beings like an administrative unit whose contribution to community and country is deemed worthless unless they get nothing for something. Nor have the Conservatives broken with their creed of the undeserving poor. The National Audit Office showed in 2017 that the homeless and all of its kinds had risen sharply since austerity began in 2010. According to the charity Shelter, in December last year, over 280,000 people were homeless in England. That's 1 in every 200. Most contemporary Tories are not compassionate conservatives or even conservatives. Their one nation rhetoric is a cipher for the free market fundamentalism of regulatory divergence and global trade deals combined with social regression and culture wars. What looks post-liberal turns out to be a combination of the old and new right orthodoxies, and it is so doubly wrong. The New Conservatives are Britain's only national party, with MPs in all three nations of Great Britain. In Scotland, they attracted nearly 700,000 voters in December of the election and are in the official opposition at Holyrood. Remarkably, the Conservatives led Labour among all social classes at the election, although Labour was much more popular among the student demographic, and their advantage was the greatest among working class C2E DE voters. Despite being powerful and ambitious, the government lacks a coherent political platform. Johnson and Cummings used the populist means to achieve liberal utilitarian ends. Regional regeneration for areas hit hard by deaustralization and global finance is focused on infrastructure investment for the many, but more Boris buses and dual carriageways will not make up for the degrading jobs that many people do. So far, the government's economic plan appears uncoordinated and will provide little more than a sticking plaster for the wounds inflicted first by Thatcherism and then by George Osborne's austerity agenda. It is wrong to dismiss Johnson's Conservatives as a rehash of the old Thatcherite vision of the UK, such as a low-tax, high-finance Singapore on the Thames. The Tories are pursuing a programme more akin to Taiwan-on-Trent, an activist entrepreneurial state that supports technology-intensive industries and relies on export services to compete in the global economy. But such a strategy exasperates the economic insecurity facing many in communities. Free trade deals and the top-down interventionist state will continue to concentrate wealth and power even as a new elite purges the old establishment. It will neither encourage virtuous behaviour among leaders and their followers, nor will it bring about a greater popular participation in our democracy. The so-called creative destruction brought about by high-tech state capitalism, and which Cummings favours, does not promote a gushing spring of wealth that trickles down to every provincial gully. Undoubtedly, invoking the will of the people against institutions has been popular with many Conservative voters, both old and new. They share Cummings' belief that the civil servants are self-serving class of bureaucrats whose main motivation is to obstruct bold reform. Calling this populism crypto-fascist is heretical and misses this Spencerian element. That is, of a political movement with mass support for ideas which elites disapprove. But Cummings' contempt for the civil service also reflects a mildless modernising tendency first popularised by New Labour, the assumption that public sector organisations always lag behind businesses, and that the state should be more like the market. This can be characterised as a London-led revolution that hollows out social institutions as the government pours money into public services. This is what New Labour did and what the Tories promised to do. The HS2 project looks every bit as a wasteful public money as Gordon Brown's private-public partnerships. In the emerging era, the Conservatives are trying to occupy the new centre ground built around the sovereign state, democracy, and a novel cross-class coalition. But as before, the spectre haunting the right is capital-ism and its destructive consequences for society, where there is growing popular disillusionment with neoliberalism economics. It is far clearer where the Tories have broken with the cultural logic of market fundamentalism. Capitalism's relentless tendency to commodify human beings and nature means that the culture is stripped of meaning and purpose. If everything has a market price, if we are customers, then nothing has intrinsic worth and is all subordinate to the utilitarian cost-benefit analysis. But effective and value for money are no measure for public good. While adding artificial intelligence and algorithms to such calculations as Cummings advocates can be beneficial, it also devalues human judgment and creativity. These processes are associated with the most mobile and instant forms of digital technology, their expanded capacity for mass surveillance and continued spectacle, which controls people through addictive fascination. Cummings shares his preference for creative destruction with the tech oligarchs. Move fast and break things, as Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg is fond of saying. In this spirit of accelerated capitalism, it clears the way for technologies that refine what makes us human, the individual. It releases from all constraints of whatever he wants. Yet Cummings' preoccupation with libertarian anarchy contains with it the seed of authoritarian control in the name of tech liberation. We will soon be able to remake human nature itself, he wrote in one of his book-length blogs, and sovereign nations are unconstrained individuals writ large. This logic is also behind the most potent slogans in our recent political campaigns: take back control, get Brexit done, and unleash Britain's potential. The Conservatives' addiction to technocratic uber-capitalism binds them in other ways too, not least the threat of China to British sovereignty. Johnson's decision to let Huawei, the Chinese telecom giant, provide part of the infrastructure for our 5G network was based on the belief that engagement with Beijing brings benefits for Britain. New technology and inward investment subject to our rules. This shallow optimism forgets that the Chinese hybrid of brutal competition and tight state control is fast becoming the dominant throughout the world. China's fusion of the Leninist state with a totalitarian technological oversight, and that's try saying that 3 times fast, threatens much more of our national security. It is about a technological mastery capable of redefining what we mean by freedom of conscience and free speech. At stake is our historical commitment to the dignity of personal enshrined in liberties, rights, and mutual obligations. For all its present dominance, it is doubtful whether the Tory party can create a new post-Brexit political and economic consensus. The new government's rhetoric oscillates between globalism and national populism. Johnson is attempting to fuse a free trade utopia with a selectively protectionist state. Cummings' vision combines the state-funded uber-capitalism with collective control by data-driven vanguard. Both pit the power of tech startups against the old elites in ways that generate a modern hybrid of populist technology. The unresolved contradictions of contemporary conservatism do not bode well for the renewal of one nation tradition. The more mutual agreements are surely the key to renewal. Local government was obliterated by the Tories twice, First when Margaret Thatcher took power away, and then when Osborne austerity removed resources. While the Conservative privileged metro mayors, um, uh, with the Conservative privileged metro mayors, it is time to devolve more power and resources to towns and cities in rural and coastal areas by connecting political institutions to cultural attachment. A popular majority are looking for a combination that is not yet on offer from either of the two main parties. This is a vision of national renewal that marries a bold transformation of capitalism with greater participation in power for most people. It involves greater economic equality coupled with moderate social policies that are family friendly and link a respect for cultural inheritance with a sense of belonging and place, as policies based on a particular conception of the person as both a free and attached. It is what the sort of people the British now want to be in this post-Brexit era. And I sort of agree with what he said there. You've got a lot of really contradictions in the Tory party, and I've said this a couple of times so far since the election. There are different factions in the Conservative Party, and on the surface, they look to be temporarily at the moment aligned, but it won't be long before the fractures start to crack and Johnson has a de-fractured Tory party. And I've said this in the past before, when the Tory party is united, they tend to be strong like they were under Margaret Thatcher. When the Tory party is divided, that's when they can't do anything, that's when they tend to lose power, and that's what we need to be aiming for, to divide the Tories, and not only that, but win back our working class colleagues back to the Labour side, and to convince more people to come over to the Labour side. Now, it looks like, I think Keir Starmer is certainly on the right path with what he's been advocating for more delegating power back to local councils and so forth. I think he's definitely on the right path. Again, I hope he wins. He certainly does seem to be in the running. We are now down to him, Long Bailey, and Nancy something, I think her name is. I can't remember her name now. But I think it's going to be a two-horse race between her and Long Bailey. Between Long Bailey and Keir Starmer, shall I say. We'll have to see what happens. But we need a new direction in the Labour Party. I think Starmer can deliver that. Corbyn's policies were popular. That's regardless of what people say. It wasn't the policies that were the problem. We need, for the next 4 years, as I said, focus on 4 core areas. Brexit isn't working. That the Tories are destroying our communities, and that it is austerity and the Tories are the problem. We need to invest and reinvest again in our NHS considerably, because if not, it could fail. And then we need to renationalise the railways. Those, I think, are the 4 key policies we really need to focus on.